Decisions. This is lesson number 5 in the Decisions series. I'm Pastor Scott Conway. Of course, we're at QX Church. We're online at qxchurch.org. And we're continuing our series on decisions and decision making and how people make decisions. Today we're talking about persuasion. Persuasion is guiding others toward new decisions. So if you're going to guide others toward new decisions, of course you need to know how decisions are made. And we've been talking about the process of making decisions. For one, people are choosing from a perceived menu of options. And people are making what they perceive to be the best choice from that menu of options. So there's a lot of things to consider there. For one thing, what do they think the menu of options is? What do they think the best choice is? What do they mean by best? Not what we mean by best. We might be trying to persuade them that accepting Jesus Christ as Savior is best. And I think we can make a very persuasive argument, but that doesn't mean they're going to accept it. For one thing, a problem you run into is what we call package deal Christianity. Depending upon what they've been exposed to before in Christianity, they might think that becoming a Christian requires certain specific things of them. If their primary exposure to Christianity has been things like the Westboro Baptist Church, they might think that being a Christian means that they have to hate homosexuals and they're expected to picket at funerals and do things like that. They might think that being a Christian requires them to adhere to their political philosophies and political views on issues that they see in the media. And if they think that that's part of the package and that they have to accept all of these things in order to accept Jesus, they might not accept Jesus because they don't accept all of those other things. And so when you're trying to persuade someone, trying to make it clear exactly what something is and isn't, trying to understand them and understand where they are, understand where they're going, understanding what they think things mean is at the heart of persuasion. Because to persuade someone to guide others toward new decisions means that they need to have some understanding of what a new decision is, what options are available to them, what options are available on their menu, and what do those options include or not include. Now, a general principle when you're trying to persuade anyone of anything, and this is a general principle, it's not universally true, it's not like a law that if this is not true, there's no way you're ever going to convince anybody of anything. But the general principle is that people must know you care before they care that you know. In general, people must know that you care before they care that you know. Now, obviously, this isn't universally true. If you are accepted and acknowledged as an authority, if you're seen as someone who has expertise, if you have a demonstrated track record of producing results, if you have a credential, if they come to you for a particular type of help or guidance, they're much more likely to accept what it is that you say. But if you're trying to persuade people you have relationship with, one of the key things is if people believe you really don't care about them as human beings, they have a tendency to not really care what you think as a human being. If you're trying to get them to do something different, if you're trying to influence their behavior, but they feel like you really only care maybe about your issue, but you don't care about them as a person, or you really only care about proving a point, you don't really care about them as a person, or you really ultimately only care about yourself, you really don't care about them, they're much less likely, less inclined to be willing to listen to you. And so people must know you care about them as human beings, that they themselves as a person matter to you. So that they have some idea that what you're sharing with them because they matter to you. That you're coming from a place of love, you're coming from a place of caring. You're coming from a place where they matter. Not just your issue, but they matter. And that if you come from this place that they really matter, that they're really important, then they are much more willing to listen to you. So here's another principle. Be a light, not a judge. And we're going to unpack this a bit and get into what we mean by be a light, what we mean by not a judge. But the general principle here in be a light, not a judge, is that people are more open to illumination than they are to condemnation. That if I come to you and I begin with, you matter, I begin with, I want the best for you, I begin with that connection, you understand that you matter to me. You understand that your life being better is important to me. You understand that you gaining more success in whatever it is you're doing is a celebration cause for me. There's not a competition. I'm not here to beat you. I'm here to love you. I'm here to care about you. And that if things are going well for you, I'm happy for you. And if things are not going well for you, then I'm sad for you. And that I'm on your side. I'm on your team. And that's the connection, that if you know I care. And I come into your life as a light. I come into your life to illuminate things for you, to help you see things and understand things and see options. I come into your life as someone who can help bring things to some clarity when they're muddled, who can bring some order to things when they're chaotic, can bring some vision to things when you seem bogged down. And that in the process of persuading you, I am helping you see. I'm helping you understand. And I'm helping you pursue and fulfill your highest values and your highest purpose. And not a judge. I don't come in calling you names. I don't call it, say, opening with, you're wrong. I don't come in attacking you. I don't come in saying that you're bad, saying that you're broken, saying that you're less, saying that there's something wrong with you. And if I do those things, I'm much more likely to be persuasive. So here's some processes for attempting to be persuasive. Understand their position, validate their feelings, agree with what you can agree with, and seek to add relevant information. Now, a lot of times we like to jump straight to that last one. We want to add relevant information. And in fact, for most people, the way they attempt to persuade people isn't even adding relevant information. A lot of people, in attempting to persuade, start off attacking an existing position. A lot of people open up with attacking an existing position and not just adding relevant information, but adding only that information, and sometimes exaggerated information, distorted information, selective information, with the sole purpose of supporting my side and attacking your side. And that's the way a lot of people attempt to do persuasion. That's why a lot of people attempt to do persuasion even on something as important and critical as leading people to Christ. Now think about this for a moment. Jesus Christ comes into our life because of love. For in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. God is love, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. It's motivated by love. It's motivated by love. It is motivated by love. And that when Jesus Christ came, he came to serve. He came not to be a judge of the world. He came to be a servant, to be a sacrifice. He came to lead us. He came to show us a way and give us a way to be reconciled to God by paying the price for our sins so that we can be forgiven, because the price has been nailed to the cross with him. And yet, very often when people are seeking to share Jesus Christ, they do not open with love. They do not open with forgiveness. They do not open with the kind of understanding that Jesus Christ showed up with. They open with self-righteousness. They open with why everybody else is wrong. That's not the way Jesus opened. In fact, if you read the Gospels, actually read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, admittedly, if you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you're going to see there's a lot of redundancy in there. So if you like, just read Luke and John. Now, the two back-to-back Gospels, Luke and John. And what you will see is that Jesus did seem to go out of his way to pick fights. Jesus did seem to argue with people. He did seem to go right at the heart of sometimes what people believed in. And when you see who is that, it was the religious leaders of his day, the people who should have known better. The people who were telling everybody else they were bad, telling everybody else they were wrong. The people who were the most judgmental, demanding people, putting burdens on other people rather than accept it upon themselves. And that's who he argued with. But see how he dealt with other people, people who he was trying to influence and persuade. How he dealt with prostitutes. How he dealt with the destitute. How he dealt with the commoners. And how he reached out to them, and how he touched them, and how he crossed social boundaries in order to make a difference in people's lives, to reach them and touch their hearts in powerful and meaningful ways. That was his approach. And as much as the Apostle Paul is seen as being this bold, blustering, powerful, bludgeoning sort of apostle. We still have Paul at Mars Hill. We have Paul who started where they were at. You have this altar to an unknown God. I know this unknown God, and he began there. Who said, I become all things to all people that I may win all to Christ. So this is a man who understood, start with them where they are. Don't open with bludgeoning them and saying you're wrong and then expect them to listen. Don't open with telling them you're bad and then expect them to listen. Open with where they are. Start with them side by side with them in something they already understand, something they already believe, where they already are, and then walk them very systematically to where you're taking them. Peter gave the very first sermon after Pentecost. And who's he talking to? He's talking to people who are familiar with the Jewish stories. And so what does he do? He opens with an Old Testament Bible study. He opens with an Old Testament Bible study to a group who is already somewhat familiar with the Old Testament. He's not telling them things that nobody in the crowd knows. He's starting with them where they're at, using things they already know, using things they already understand, using things they already believe, to show them this is what flows from that. And if you can see that this is what flows from that, now let me tell you about the rest of this. And they understood this basic principle of begin where they're at and walk them forward from there. So being persuasive begins with understand their position. Understand where somebody's at. Understand what they already think. Understand what they already believe. Start with them where they're at. Listen to them. Ask questions. Find out what they're thinking, why they're thinking about it. And if necessary, take notes. Because honestly, some of us aren't very elegant listeners. Sometimes we will listen, but we listen automatically to respond. We've kind of grown up doing that. Sometimes we listen in order to argue. Sometimes we listen in order to avoid. And once somebody is in this mode of listening in order to avoid, you're not really hearing. Once you're thinking about listening to respond, you're not really hearing. When you're thinking about listening in order to wait for your turn, you're not really hearing. So sometimes you may even need to take some notes. Sometimes as part of understanding someone's position might take a long time. Sometimes you could end up, if you're working on systematically sharing Christ with someone, if ultimately that's something you envision as being a part of this particular relationship, you might spend a long time trying to understand someone's position before they are convinced that you care and you really do understand. That this could take time. This could take a lot of time. Sometimes hours, sometimes days, weeks, months, years, depending on the nature of your relationship and how often you talk. And as someone has a clear understanding that you really do understand, then you might be able to be more persuasive. Now, in the process of understanding, there's another big piece, and that's validate their feelings. Sometimes we like to attack someone's feelings. Sometimes we like to tell someone, oh, there's nothing to be upset about. Oh, there's no reality, just get over it. That's a long time ago. Oh, what's the big deal? Oh, I've had worse. Oh, you tell stories of somebody else who had a different situation that was infinitely worse than the situation this person is going through or talking about. And there's been times where rather than validate the feelings someone else is going through, understanding what someone's going through and validating them in their own sorrow, even in a loss of life, even while somebody's life is fading or someone has actually died, there are people who will show up and they'll be telling their own story. Instead of offering presence and comfort to the people that they're there allegedly to comfort, instead of offering their condolences, and sometimes even just sitting quietly with someone, it can be the most powerful thing you can do, that they feel compelled to be sharing their own story, which does nothing to help the people hearing the story. But they get so caught up in the moment, they don't know what to do, and they feel they have to offer something, and so they'll talk about their aunt who had cancer, or they'll talk about their grandmother who died of cancer, or a friend of theirs that they had that got through it twice. And then the Conway family, cancer is the #1 killer of Conways, which is actually a great comfort to me, because that gives me a fairly reasonable probability that if cancer is what typically comes for Conways, and cancer is ultimately what comes for me, that there'll be some time between what's going to kill me showing up and it actually killing me. There'll be some time for me to make some choices and decisions and take care of some things. As opposed to, there's some people I know whose family heritage biologically, as far as what takes their lives, is heart disease, where you can be talking to someone fine one day and the next day they're just gone. And that's kind of scary to me, because you don't have any time to make amends and say things that maybe have gone unsaid for too long. But you focus on them. You validate their feelings. You validate where they're at and why they're at there. Now, you may not agree with them. Now, this is an important thing to really wrap your head around. Understanding something is not the same as agreeing. You can understand someone's position. That does not mean you must agree with someone's position. You can validate someone else's feelings. That doesn't mean that you have to feel the same thing, or even that those feelings have to make sense to you and that you think you would feel the same way. Validating someone's feelings means you understand that they feel the way that they feel. And it's okay for them to feel the way that they feel. And it even makes sense for them to feel the way that they feel. Now, you may not think it makes sense to you. You may harbor this fantasy that you wouldn't feel the same way, but you might. Because all of their feelings are bubbling up from a whole collection of things, and if you don't understand how they feel, chances are high that you also don't really understand their position, or that the depth of their position, or where it's coming from, is different than what you understand. There's something missing from your understanding. Because when you do really understand where someone's coming from, their emotions begin to make sense to you. You may be wrong. They may not see it. For instance, you might be dealing with someone and they have every rational argument in the world against Christianity, but they seem really, really angry. And you're not quite sure you understand. Why are they so angry about Christian things? Why are they so angry at God? Why are they so angry at Christ? And everything in the logical argument that they've been giving you, everything you've understood about what they're telling you, might make some logical sense at the level where you understand their position. What you don't understand is why they're so upset by it. And very often, what the truth is there's a depth or a resonance to it. There's a personal experience that they've had, often with Christians, that is driving that fury. And that emotion is driving their logic as we have the decision-making process. That as a survival reflex, to emotionally survive a very difficult situation, that they develop their defense mechanism. That they have this emotional intensity that's driving their emotion. That the survival reflex has informed their emotions, and their emotions have informed their logic. And when you're looking just at the logic, you may not understand how this logic generates such emotion. It's because it doesn't. That emotion is coming from somewhere else. Sometimes you have people who are furious with men in general, and they have all of these logical, lofty, very feminist views about why this is so important, but the real driving passion comes from how some men have treated her or other women important to her. Sometimes you have men who are very anti-women and anti-feminist. And when you get behind it, you find a lot of times what's driven that is a relationship with a mother figure, or ex-girlfriends, their experience with some women, often women with power, authority, or influence in their lives. And so when you begin to look behind the logic, you'll find something that is driving the emotion, often something that they may need to let go of. And that if they don't let go of that, they're never going to be able to see a different logic, because to them, that logical shift is going to invalidate their emotions. And the more you can validate their emotions based on what happened and then maybe disconnect it in the course of conversation and relationship, the better a chance you'll have of persuading somebody. Agree with what you can agree with. Agree with what you can agree with possible reframe. Now what this means is you just have to reframe. That means look at it differently than you might normally look at in order to be able to agree with them. Now, one way I will often frame when I'm talking to someone who is emotionally intense, especially someone who is suicidal, is I will say a phrase that goes something like this. If what happened to you happened to me and I felt about it the same way you feel about it, I'd want to kill myself too. Now, when you diagram that sentence out, what you begin to realize is what I'm really saying is if I felt suicidal, I'd feel like killing myself. It's a little bit redundant. But it is actually true. Because if you felt like they feel, you'd feel like they feel. You'd want to do what their feelings are telling them to do. You'd be responding the way they're responding if you felt the way they felt. And if you understand this basic premise, they have a whole life, a whole history. And that whole history, the collection of their experiences, the collection of their observations, combined with the collection of their education to drive their emotions. And so if you can not only validate their feelings, you can find what you would agree with. So recently I've been watching people engaging in the creation-evolution debate. And in my particular case, I see a lot of validity on each side. I've engaged in the creation-evolution debate, and I've won the creation-evolution debate from either side of the debate. Now, of course, if I can win from the creation side, does that mean creationism is true? If I can then also step over to the evolution side, and I can win the debate from the evolution side. And in particular, I'll tell you, my debate as the evolutionist, to me, actually was the most fun debate. Because it was me versus an entire room of creationists. So we didn't do it as a forum of, me and one other person, and then the room gets to decide. The general view of that is the room is going to decide that the side that they already agreed with was the side that won. That's typical. In this particular case, I had a room of 17 creationists that had been going through a creationism course. And the instructor of the course, while she was very proud of the fact that everyone was really learning and grasping the material, her concern was they were getting very disdainful of evolutionists. They were getting very disdainful of science. And that wasn't her purpose. Her purpose was to teach kind of the balancing information so they could kind of see this side. But she thought they had gone too far. And she asked if I could come help out. And as we discussed it, we determined that a debate format would be best. And so I decided that, well, the best thing to probably do, since all of them seemed to be on the same page that she was concerned that they were on, is I'll just take on the whole room. And so me and 17 creationists had this debate. And then my definition for them as to who won the debate is I let them decide if they won or I won. And the way I define it for them is if someone was truly on the fence, if they truly had no opinion, if they were stuck between the two, which side do you think they would be more likely to fall on? And all of the creationists had to agree that the evolution position seemed like it made more sense. Now, they know that I'm a creationist, so they wondered how that really worked, and if I really had answers to all those questions that I left with them. And then, of course, I told them, yes, I do, and that there are gaps in creation theory, just like there are gaps in evolution theory. The gaps in evolution do not prove creationism true. It just proves that there's gaps. The gaps in creation theory don't prove that creationism isn't true. It just proves that there's gaps. And as it began to get more understanding, the professor that was teaching this particular group of people was much more satisfied that they were now approaching the issue with a bit more humility. And now these creationists could agree with the evolutionists as to how sensible evolution was. They understood enough to be able to say, yes, there is a fossil record. Yes, there is this appearance of evolution. Yes, there is a transition. And so you don't just attack everything. And the more you can agree with what you can agree with, the more you can connect on your points of agreement and build from there, just like Paul did at Mars Hill. Said, you have this altar to an unknown God. Let me tell you about the unknown God. And that when you begin with where somebody's at, if you begin with where you already agree and you build on your agreement step by step and systematically, beginning with where you're on the same page, rather than underlining every place you agree, what you're doing is instead of picking a fight and making it a conflict, you're picking a friendship and you're making it a cooperative effort. And part of listening is being willing to be persuaded too. Now, if you understand their position, if you validated their feelings, if you agreed with everything you can agree with, then seek to add relevant information. Now, by relevant information, there's several elements of what makes information relevant. One, of course, is, is it true? Because lies are irrelevant to persuading somebody. Hopefully people understand this. hold loosely to the information you share because they may have counterpoints. But as you seek to share relevant information, the best way to share relevant information is through questions. A little bit of data and some questions about it. Like, well, my side has a way that we handle an issue like this. How does your side handle an issue like that? I'm curious. And really listen to the answer. So you're back to, really seek to understand. And as they share, you go, okay, well, that's an interesting way to handle it. I think that would probably work. Because obviously it is working for some people. So is it logical to say it would probably work if it's actually working? Of course it is. This is, do you mind if I share the way my side handles that situation? And most people will give permission. And then you share how your side handles that. And you're adding relevant information in a non-combative way. So you're not doing the understand, validate feelings, and agree with what you can agree with as a tactic to then bludgeon them over the head. You're continuing that flow, and you seek those openings to add information that is relevant to the discussion and be open to their information that is also relevant to the discussion. So it's a two-way street. It's not just you, bam, 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 trying to make a difference in them. It's also being open to them making a difference for you. Even if you do not believe you can be persuaded because you're sure you're right, keeping in mind that if they also believe that they cannot be persuaded because they're sure they're right, chances are they're not really listening to you anyway. But assuming you two have enough rapport, you shouldn't be threatened by information. The information, if anything else, might show you where you have holes and gaps in your side. So then you can go investigate. Now you may need to adjust your side, but at least you can go ask questions. If you don't know the answers already, you can go do some of your own research. You can be open to refining your position, or possibly even just refining your delivery so that you don't deliver right into some of these gaps. So be a light. Getting more into being a light, to be a light, you must go to them. Going to where they are means you must find out where they are. Now try to think about this for a moment. If you're stuck in darkness, and I'm way over here, and I've got light over here, but there's no light between me and you. You can't see your path. You can't see your own feet. And somehow you're supposed to make your way over here because I just tell you this is where the light is. To be a light to the path, a lamp to the feet. I go to you where you are, so now you can see where you are. And I walk you over here so you can see the path you're walking on. You can see where you're stepping. That's the metaphor. So when you listen, truly listen to understand. Listen elegantly. Now what listen elegantly means you ask clarifying questions. You reflect back your understanding of what they said. You're not parroting back what they said. You're reflecting back an understanding of what they said. When you can paraphrase their words back to them to their satisfaction that you've got it, now you probably understand. If all you do is you parrot back their own vocabulary, almost like you had a recorder and you recorded the audio and you can play the audio back, that's not listening elegantly. That's telling you you heard the words that came out of their mouth. That doesn't necessarily mean that you understood what they were saying. When you can paraphrase, when you can develop your own emotional word picture, and that is the words maybe to describe a metaphor that has the same emotional content, emotional punch, to show them that you've taken what they've said, you've understood it, you've translated it to some sort of a metaphor or some sort of way of grasping it, and you can reflect it back to them, and they go, that's it. Now you have understanding. Being able to ask clarifying questions. Sometimes you'll reflect back and say, well, no, that's not quite it. And you can ask them, okay, well, what in here needs to still be adjusted? And listening elegantly sometimes can take time. If you're in a counseling type scenario and someone has difficulty communicating, in particular if they're afraid to communicate, if they've been punished for communicating in the past, if they've been told just to be quiet, if they've just been run roughshod over by people, they might not have the vocabulary because they're always used to other people giving them the vocabulary. You could spend an entire session just trying to find out one little thing as you're trying to get them to be able to explain an idea or a feeling or a concept to you. And you reflect back to them and go, well, it was kind of it. Well, I don't know, not really. And you keep asking, okay, well, how would you adjust this metaphor so that it's clearer, or is it just dead wrong? If we need to go someplace else entirely, we can do that. And so as you're talking, as you're discussing, sometimes you'll find if someone has inexperience communicating, if you're dealing with young people in particular, and they don't have a frame of reference, or you're talking to someone where you have a very limited common frame of reference, especially on the issue being discussed, this listening elegantly can be very, very time consuming. But it's part of really understanding. Add relevant information through questions. Whenever you can, ask questions. Get them to think through the relevant information, because sometimes you need facts. Sometimes you need to bring in historical data, archaeological evidence, historical evidence. I mean, sometimes you have that kind of data that needs to be introduced. A lot of times when you're talking to someone, when you're having a more persuasive discussion, you don't really need to give them more data. Data is not the problem. You need to get them thinking in a slightly different way. Being willing to open their mind just a little bit and look at something a little bit differently. And you can do that very effectively with questions, just by asking them a question like, oh, well, it's kind of an interesting approach to that, but now to me it looks like if you do that, you can have some other issues over here, and so I assume that there's a way all that gets dealt with too. So how does your view kind of like deal with all these other things? And get them thinking through, because some of those people get so fixated. And we just came through a political season, so we see that. People get so fixated, my side's right, that side's wrong. And sometimes as simple a thing as, okay, I understand the perspective that you're talking about. And if that's true, and I'm going, I don't know one way or the other, but if that's true, I can certainly see that being an issue. Just to make sure that the issue really is the issue. If someone from your side made an equally stupid statement, does that mean that your side should be rejected just as much as you think the other side should be rejected? Because if that's not true, then maybe the issue is not really the issue. Maybe it's just sides. And so I'm just curious if that's a consistent principle. So if, say it's a Democrat-Republican thing, and say a Republican has said something incredibly stupid in the course of a discussion, and they've taken that one thing from that one Republican in that one instance, and they're going to blow it up into a great big issue and say, okay, well, so if a Democrat has said something that was equally stupid, is it equally valid to take that one Democrat, that one time, regardless of the context, pull that out and make that the issue? And to reject the Democrat side as much as rejecting the Republican side on the issue that you're talking about. And, 99 times out of 100, I found that answer to be no. And, someone said, well, you just want me to vote Republican. Well, I happen to not be registered Republican. I happen to not be registered Democrat. I'm a registered third party. So, I can always come at it as, just, saying, because if we reject both sides, chances are very high you're going to be landing closer to my side, and I'm a third party. So if we get enough people rejecting both the Democrats and the Republicans, then the third parties have a shot, right? And very often people will back down because the issue isn't the issue. But that's getting to them through questions. I'm not arguing with them, oh yeah, well, the Democrats have said stuff just as bad, and, that's arguing. But asking them questions of, okay, is that really the principle? This is what you say the principle is, and this is why you say the other side ought to be rejected, just to make sure I'm clear. Is it equally true that when it's your side, that your side should also equally be rejected for exactly the same level of reasons? And so if you can do things with questions, people won't argue with their own answers. Now, they may argue with you, but they won't argue with their own answer. If you ask a question, and they're backed into a corner where they have to answer their own question, or they happily answer the question. Sometimes a lot of people really, honestly, they're quite happy to answer your own question, or your questions. And if it's their answer, people won't argue with their answer. Now, they may have exceptions and other reasons and collateral stuff, but they're not going to say their own answer is wrong. Another one is permissions. Another way to add relevant information is get permission. Like it says, is it okay if I share, and you get their permission to share your evidence. You get your permission to share their story. Another one is just sharing. And the most powerful way to share some of these is in a story format. And sometimes in the course of sharing in a story format, saying, okay, well, this is something I've run into. And sometimes some of the most powerful stories you can share is like, okay, instead of just, bang, here's the information. So, well, that is a really good point. Now, what I've heard from other teachers in this area that kind of teach, on my side that I've heard, is something like, and then you share. And so instead of just saying, you're wrong, you're sharing what someone else has said, and ask, now, how would you deal with that? It's, well, that's just not true. Say, okay, so now, if it is true then, does that then destroy your position? Is that why it just can't be true? That's just not true. Okay, well, all I'm asking, and you're back to asking, is if there's a way to find out if it is true. If it is true, does that mean anything? And if they keep thinking, well, it's not true, say, well, I'm going to take that to mean that, well, if it is true, then that really does mean something, and that might be something worth exploring then, because if it's really not true, like you say, I would love to know it's not true. Because if it's really not true and we can demonstrate clearly, obviously, there's no way that's true, well, I need to let it go. But if it is true, even if it might be true, if it might be true, it might be relevant. And if it is true, it might be very important. And so that's something I would like to explore with you. What do you think? And you go back to questions and give them a chance to explain where they are with that. Add relevant information by prompting their questions with your true stories. And so when you're sharing some of your stories, especially if you're sharing where something was in congruence with what they're talking about and there were issues that arose, or talk about things that you know of, where you have stories, things that happen, actual true stories. Things that happened to you are most powerful because they were you. It's hard to say that didn't happen to you. Things you personally observed, that you were there, you saw it unfold, so it's not things that where you just heard it like third and fourth and fifth hand. It's not some urban legend that you actually saw it. Those are some of those powerful stories that prompt them to have to ask you questions. And then you be prepared to answer. Now, something to remember is you may only persuade he who will stay engaged. You may only persuade he who will stay engaged. Once someone disengages, once someone is no longer listening to you, once someone is no longer talking to you, you're no longer influencing them. And if you're engaged in conflict, sometimes conflict is actually engagement. At least they're still engaging with you. Now, ideally, you're not the one making it a fight. But if there's a fight, if it's turning into an argument, if it's turning into a conflict, they're the ones doing it, and you're being as cooperative as circumstances will allow, and keeping them engaged, keeping them talking. Your goal is not to shove them away. Your goal is not to be the one that alienates them. So you need to be sensitive to where they're at and where they are in this kind of, storming off, I never want to talk to you again point. So there was a woman that I was talking to about Christianity versus Catholicism specifically versus kind of a more broad-based, biblical Christianity that can include most of Catholicism in my particular view. And in particular, what she was trying to do is because she really liked me, she saw that I was devoted to God, she saw that I was a serious Christian, and so in her heart, the way she saw this was obviously, you just don't know enough about Catholicism, because if you were truly devoted to God, obviously you would be a Catholic, and that was her view. And so we engaged in this ongoing dialogue, and she'd give me material that she got from her priest, and she might talk to her husband, and get some more stuff, and we had this whole kind of dynamic playing out. And as it played out, she would ask me questions about the material that she gave me, and have this whole ongoing discourse with me. Well, I kept having answers to the questions, the hard questions, and some questions about some of the information, which, she was more than welcome to go back and talk to her priest about it. I didn't expect her to know all the answers. I mean, she's not ordained clergy. And so I'm more than happy for her to go talk to a priest, a Monsignor, bishop, get whatever information she could from any resource that she could get it, go to Catholic Answers and pitch the question to them. I was more than happy to wait a week or two or three to get a response back on things. I was in no particular hurry. But the day did come where she finally said, I can't talk to you about this anymore. And she disengaged. Now, in this particular case, I wasn't trying to persuade her. I was satisfied that her heart was genuinely for Christ, and that she found Christ in the Catholic Church, and that she was a born-again Christian within Catholicism. I watched the way this woman lived her life. I listened to her theology. I listened to her perspective on things, and I was very satisfied that she was saved. She wasn't satisfied that I was saved because she believed that rejecting Christ's church, which in her view is the founding church of Jesus Christ from the Pope Peter on down through the lineage of Catholicism, and that only Catholics and the Orthodox were truly within the church, and that this whole Protestant revolution came about by rebellion against God's lawful authority. So she had a view, and she was trying to persuade me. And I was more than happy to stay engaged and give her every opportunity to be persuasive. And so long as someone stays engaged, you have an opportunity to persuade. Now, be a light, not a judge. Not a judge part. When you judge, you slam the door on rapport. I'm going to say that again. When you judge, you slam the door on rapport. Now, rapport is like the sense of connection. I mean, that's basically all rapport is. When you're developing rapport with someone, there's like something there. There's like a spark. There's a connection. There's a sameness. There's something between you and I that says, hey, we could be on the same side. You know, you can find rapport because, you know, you both like baseball. You both like football. We just went to a football game yesterday. You could chat with someone about yesterday's game. You know, we stored a little bit of rapport with a former student of mine who saw my post on Facebook and says, oh my gosh, you're at the game, I'm in the band. Well, I knew 3 people in the band. And turns out one of the 3 people I know knows her, but didn't know that she knew me. And so there was instant rapport because we have connection through the band, we have connection through the martial arts school, and the kind of this double point of connection and this history, I mean, this old history from when she was a kid, but it created this instant rapport, this instant level of connection. Now, so long as I don't do anything to attack that connection, we have rapport. We have connection, in this case around at least 3 different directions. And it also creates more rapport between her and the other people in the band that she knows also know me, because there's now this joint experience that all 4 of them have had, that 3 of them knew because the 3 of them knew each other, but now they know that this 4th person has had the same experience by being in the same place, learning the same things from the same people, and that gives them a chance to connect and build rapport. Well, once you start passing judgment, you break rapport. Now, in this particular case, this young lady has kind of funky colored hair. She's done a kind of a very modern type cut, not a business-like cut, but a modern style cut. And, you know, some interesting colors that doesn't quite match the natural color of her hair, which I always thought was beautiful. But, you know, it wasn't as interesting. It was, you know, beautiful, but, you know, probably too typical for the style that she's after right now. Now, if I immediately made an issue out of her hair, would I be building rapport or breaking rapport? I'd be breaking it, obviously. If I passed judgment on her because now she has kind of the short, funky hair, what did I do? I just broke the rapport that we had. So when you pass judgment on people, you are slamming the door shut on rapport. You're also slamming the door shut on additional rapport you could continue building. Because now, they've just backed off from you. You might still be seeking points of connection, but they're thinking, look, you just slammed the door in my face and you still want to talk to me? It literally is like trying to talk through a slammed door. It's hard to get through to people, and it's hard for people to take you seriously, that you understand and that you care when you pass judgment on them. When you start telling someone they're bad, which is pretty much what judgment is, you are bad, pretty much no matter what label you use, they will disengage. And worse, they might believe you. And if they believe you that they're bad, not only have you broken rapport, but now you've made matters worse. That you've entered into someone's life and done damage, a fundamental violation of the silver rule, which is first do no harm. That you can try to highlight where there are already issues, that's a little different, if you're going to help them. But if you're going to pass judgment and they believe you and disengage, now they feel worse about themselves and now they're less likely to talk to you. If you really believe that you have the answers and now you've hurt someone, you let them believe that they're bad in your eyes. Well, they can't come to you because you just think that they're bad. And it's hard for someone to believe that both you love them and you believe that they're bad. And so, these are tricky waters to follow. So the easy thing is just avoid judgment. Just like God said, judge not, lest you be judged. Now, that doesn't mean you can't acknowledge behaviors as a problem. You just hold back from ascribing the behaviors to some fundamental flaw in who and what they are. You understand the difference there? Now, when you try to persuade someone, expect the line will only move a little. Oh, on the issue of judgment, we've done a whole series on judgment. So if you want to dive into that issue, we have a whole series that you can get into on understanding what judgment is, what it isn't, what you ought to do, what you shouldn't do, what you should never ever do, what is your obligation to do, what is your right to do, and so on and so forth. All of that is wrapped up in the whole issue. Tons of scripture on judging, not lest you be judged, and tons of scripture on things that will happen if you do pass judgment. And so, some pretty significant things that have to do with the issue of what you let go and about whether there's condemnation or not for those who are Jesus Christ. I think you know the answer. But when you're trying to persuade someone, something else that's important to remember is to expect the line will only move a little. Expect that the line will only move a little. When you're attempting to persuade someone, don't expect a sudden, radical, dramatic change. Don't expect to walk up to someone and say, "Hi, would you like to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior?" And I've never heard of this Jesus before, but sure! That probably doesn't really happen all that often. We're going to get into it in a little bit about what it takes to make big changes. But expect that it'll be a little change. It'll be possibly an immediate change, an immediate insight, a shift that may occur, but it really is likely to only be a little step. That one person may be a planter. You may just be planting the seed, or you may be one who waters, or you might be the one who harvests, but it's God who makes things grow. It's 1 Corinthians 3:18. The one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, that they will each be rewarded according to their own labor. And so you might be the one planting, you might be the one preparing the soil, you might be, using the farming metaphor, there's all kinds of things here. You might be the one just pulling up weeds. You might be the one tilling the soil. You might be the one providing the fertilizer. You might be the one providing the minerals into the fertilizer. Depending how far away somebody is, there might be a lot of steps that need to be taken to move someone to any given decision. And religious decisions, accepting Jesus Christ as Savior, and with all of the baggage someone might have surrounding a decision like that, that could take some time. And for the watering and the tending, and sometimes, burns will come and will kill what was growing. Sometimes a frost will come and it will kill what was growing. And you thought someone was getting closer, but now they're getting further away. The holding of the wheat and the tares, or it gets all mixed up together. And some that could come by and pluck the seeds up. And there's all kinds of things that could go wrong in farming. And guess what? There's all kinds of things that can go wrong in any sort of systematic teaching or persuasion of somebody. But just know that you may have a role, and hopefully your role is moving things forward. It often takes big things to make a big change. Now, we like seeing big change. But very often when something happens and someone makes an immediate conversion, that person you just met who'd never heard of Jesus Christ immediately wants to accept, well, you might want to think about how long you expect that to last. If any given person could walk up with any given message and just deliver their message, and boom, oh yes, and they're accepting enthusiastically. Paul's road to Damascus conversion. That was a big thing. So here you have a man who's devoted to God, and the heavens open up, and he gets blinded, and stuff happens. That was a huge shift for him. Pentecost. What happened at Pentecost? You have the Holy Spirit being poured out. The whole idea of the tongues of flames, and people speaking in various languages, and whatever else was going on there. All of that power suddenly manifesting in this incredible, powerful way. That got people's attention. The burning bush, when Moses saying, now wait a second, the whole thing, it's on fire, but it's not being consumed. This is like a weird thing. And then he talks to God. That's pretty serious stuff. And you get this massive conversion. But one of the things to be aware of is just because there's a big thing doesn't necessarily mean there will be a big change. So big changes tend to flow from big things, but sometimes big things still don't make that much of a change. Look at what was going on with the plagues of Egypt. You get plague, does Pharaoh change? You get plague, does Pharaoh change? You get plague, 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 plague. You get 10 plagues. They leave. You get the fire. You get the parting of the sea. He's still after them. Sends the army. Now, never send an army on a path that is only safe because the other side's God is holding the waters apart. That's not safe. But then even look at how Israel behaved. How long did it take before they wanted their golden calf and they're having a celebration? Some chunk of them. They saw plague, 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 10 plagues. They saw the fire. They saw the waters. They experienced all this. Moses went up the mountain. They've got, the whole rumbling going on up there. I mean, they were there for this whole thing. And a percentage of them, thousands of them, still did the old habits. Didn't change. And you look at how often the people, that's not every given individual, but the people as a whole grumbled during their trek and wanted to flee from this promised land. It's like, were you not there for the plagues? Were you not there for the miracles? Have you not been paying attention to this pillar of smoke by day, fire by night, leading us here? Don't you get it? And no, they didn't. And so 40 more years, off they go. And big things, still producing no change. That happens sometimes. But it often takes big things to create big change. Ordinary things tend to make ordinary changes. And so sometimes, if you're going to be persuading someone with, honestly, fairly ordinary things, expect only an ordinary level of change. An ordinary level of change is often just a step. It's often just one more thing to consider. It's getting that seed planted, or another seed planted, and hopefully a seed that's not going to get plucked up planted. It's getting another shoot to grow, and hopefully one that's going to have firm enough roots that it's going to stick. And the whole parable of the good soil and about the birds coming and taking the seeds. And you don't know where you are in the equation. You don't know what your role is. You don't know where you are. But ordinary things tend to make ordinary changes from wherever you are in the process, and you are persuading toward change. You're just trying to make a difference. You're not always pushing to close, close, close. You may not be the one to pray a prayer with somebody. You may not be the one to walk someone all the way to the conclusion of some issue. You may just be someone who is just one more voice in a chorus, helping them begin to see what this whole thing looks like, what this whole thing sounds like, and to experience a little bit more depth, a little bit more resonance, a little bit more thoughtfulness, a little bit more love, a little bit more patience, a little bit more connection. Now we're going to finish the Decisions series next time with Decisions 6, and then our 6-lesson series on this topic will be done. But I do hope that this particular lesson on persuasion, and the next one, which is also dealing particularly with persuasion, kind of helps you see that sometimes that natural inclination we have to want to argue with someone, to want to basically bludgeon someone with our side, very often isn't going to be a very effective way to do things. It might make us feel better, might make us look good to people already on our side, but as far as making a difference in the lives of the people we are attempting to persuade, sometimes it's not so effective. Often, in fact, I would say it is producing exactly the opposite outcome that we might actually be seeking. Decisions. We'll see you back next time. Thank you.